I don't want to say comes into play, but once you saw the huge fireball, clearly that was also involved.
Yes.
Bill Krupp, what indications would the astronauts get that something was wrong, and what could they do about it?
Well, things happened so rapidly that they probably didn't have any indication. If they did have an indication, say the vehicle was deviating from its trajectory, the range safety officer would alert him by turning on a range safety light in the cockpit, and this then gives the crew a few seconds to do a fast separation from the external tank and the solid rocket boosters. By just throwing one switch and punching a button, they can separate the shuttle from this power package of the tank and the two solid rocket boosters. However, it doesn't appear that that happened.
It would have to happen so quickly that the commander and the pilot would have to make that decision almost instantly, would they not?
Well, once the range safety light comes on, this tells the crew that the range safety officer is going to detonate the vehicle, so the crew has to do the fast step immediately. They only have a matter of a couple seconds to get off the vehicle.
Leo Krupp, you helped design some of these space vehicles. I want to make sure I understand that inside that cockpit, the commander and the pilot are watching an incredible amount of electrical, mechanical, and computerized equipment. When something goes wrong, a red light comes on. They could have seen the red light, and they have the ability to separate the space shuttle itself from that explosive fuel tank on which it's riding and the two solid rocket boosters, what you call the SRBs.
That's right. This can be done manually by throwing one switch and pressing one button, and usually the pilot riding in the right seat is standing by to do this if the need arises.
But important, sorry, go ahead.
Before he would do a fast step, however, he would probably be alerted by the range safety officer, and to my knowledge, this problem occurred so rapidly that the range safety officer wasn't involved in the decision-making of whether the vehicle was going to be able to maintain trajectory or not.
Forgive me for the interruption. It was unintended, but I was going to note that mission controller in Houston seemed to have no indication that anything was wrong before the explosion.
That's right. If you listen to that last tape and the voice there, everything appeared to be perfectly normal, and then suddenly these small flame leaks occurred, and a matter of a second later, the vehicle detonated.
Question, Leo Krupp. We're told that the fuel in the solid rocket boosters, is a rubber-like substance that wouldn't ignite if you hit it with a heavy instrument repeatedly. While we all know the liquid hydrogen in the large tank is highly volatile, highly explosive, how could you, and you talk of flame leaks at the base of the solid rocket booster, how could that have been ignited? Let's just, as a hypothesis, say maybe it started there. How could that have started when you can't even beat on the stuff and make it explode?
Well, Dan, I don't think the solid rocket booster exploded. What it did was when it had, and this is all conjecture, you got to realize, it appears that there were some burn-throughs and some flame leaks coming out, and once this extremely hot gas comes out, it could ignite an explosion of the external tank.
So while the solid rocket booster has a rubber-like substance as a fuel, if the vapors begin to come off of it and escape, then that is flammable and highly explosive.
That's right.
In fact, that's the way the range safety officer
detonate the vehicle if it gets out of trajectory and becomes a dangerous missile. He has the ability to detonate this through the SRBs.
Leo Krupp, I know you've been on the weather studio for part of our coverage. We've emphasized repeatedly that NASA has said nothing officially about what happened or why it happened. Understandably, they want to check and be sure of what they say when they say anything publicly, and so far they've not even officially announced the fate of those aboard the shuttle, although, let me ask you directly, person to person, is there any doubt in your mind as to the fate of the 7 people aboard that vehicle?
Well, Dan, it appears that the vehicle could not survive that type of an explosion that we just witnessed on the tape, and if they had been able to do a fast separation and fly the vehicle away, you would have seen the shuttle vehicle flying away, and then the next problem, of course, would have been for the crew to get it under control and make a controlled landing in the ocean, and it appears that that did not happen.
Leo Krupp, could the ice, we've had a discussion this morning about the unusual situation in which you had freezing temperatures at the Cape today, and the delay this morning was a 2-hour delay, at least partially, if not entirely, because they wanted to have an ice check. Without saying whether this is what happened or not, could the ice we saw before the launch have been a factor in this disaster? There is a picture on videotape of the ice.
Well, Dan, I don't think anyone can say for sure. It appears that it didn't. I think NASA waited until the temperature warmed up and the ice danger subsided. And also at the point where this occurred, after the vehicle was up around 27,000 feet, had gone through max Q, max dynamic pressure. Any ice that was on the vehicle probably would have been burned off by that time. However, I think the weather conditions in Florida could have had an impact on this vehicle because they had abnormally cold air, upper air, which would change the dynamic pressure pattern slightly. And also, if the jet stream was in the area, if they went through the jet stream, they might have suffered some wind shears or something. But I think probably weather has to be investigated, and NASA will look into all these things. They have all the data, and they will look into them, and when they finish analyzing it, I'm sure they'll have a pretty good idea what happened and how to circumvent these problems in the future.
As part of our CBS News live coverage of the aftermath of today's explosion in the air about 72 seconds into launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger, we're talking to Leo Krupp, the former Rockwell Shuttle research pilot. He is in our newsroom in Los Angeles. Leo Krupp, the solid rocket boosters are reusable. They're designed to be reusable. The main fuel tank is not, but the solid rocket boosters are reusable. So these have been used before on previous shuttle flights. Question, could metal fatigue have been a factor in reusing these? Could that have been a factor in what happened today?
Well, Dan, here again, I don't think anyone can say, but the tanks are not reused as a total unit. What they do is they recover the solid rocket boosters after each launch, and they bring them back. They take them apart, clean them up, and they reuse parts. But the solid rocket booster is not reused as a single unit. So even though this vehicle had reused parts of solid rocket boosters, it did not have an entire unit that had been reused. And these things are very thoroughly checked, and I really don't know how to answer that. I think probably this is a question that the engineers that work on the solid rocket boosters would have to answer. But I know that they probably have designed it properly and they have checked it out properly.
Leo Krupp, I want to replay the videotape in real time now, and before we do so, here's what I would like for you to do, if you will, please. Describe for us at each stage what the crew of the shuttle is doing. Now, in the launch period, the commander and the pilot are or not the only two people aboard who actually have things to do besides ride.
That's right.
All right, we want to play the tape, and at each stage from launch right on up, please tell us what they are thinking and what they're doing at any given time.
Throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Well, at this point, the commander in the left seat has throttled his vehicle back up. He going through maximum dynamic pressure, he throttles back, and then he throttles back up to 104%, and that's when the problem occurred.
All right, now what I want to do, Leo Krupp, is go back to the videotape from the very moment of launch. What we're attempting to do here, based on your experience, from the very moment of launch, from the very first moment it begins lifting off, tell us step by step, stage by stage, what the commander and the pilot of the spacecraft are doing. It may take us a second here just to get the videotape going from liftoff right on up. Would like to know what their responsibilities are, what they're thinking and what they're doing, what they were thinking and doing. We have no way of knowing what they're thinking, what they were doing during that 72 to 75 seconds this morning. Here we go.
2, 1, and liftoff.
Okay, the first thing after liftoff is the roll maneuver, which rolls the vehicle so it's going on the right azimuth to achieve its orbital path. Now it's going through that roll. At the same time, it's pitching over. The crew are merely monitoring everything at this point. They're watching everything to see that everything is okay. The first real crew function occurs at about a minute into the flight when he has to throttle the engines back from 104% back to 65 to keep the vehicle from going too fast through this high dynamic pressure region. He's throttling back at this time. Now the guy in the right seat, the pilot in the right seat, is standing by to back up for fast separation on these buttons I told you about. Once he's through maximum dynamic pressure region, which lasts for about, 4 or 5 seconds, then he throttles the vehicle back up to 104% again, and the flight should proceed normally on to the next function. Then would be the solid rocket booster separation, which occurs at about a couple minutes into the flight.
But it never made it a couple of minutes into the flight. We're now at about the 65-second mark, I think.
That's right. See, everything was okay at throttle up, and as soon as he throttled up, then we saw these these apparent burn-throughs, and then suddenly a very violent explosion.
Leo Krupp, could the throttling up process itself have contributed to this?
Well, by throttling up, he's taking the engines from 64% or 65% and bringing them back up to 104. So what he's doing is he's increasing the pressures in the nozzle and this kind of stuff. So it is a factor, certainly. Besides making the vehicle accelerate more, it's also changing the pressures in the solid rocket booster nozzle areas.
Yes, when we speak of the engines and his ability to throttle up and throttle down the engines, we're speaking of the three engines in the tail of the spacecraft itself. The solid rocket boosters are, in effect, going on their own off to the side.
That's right. Yeah, we're talking about the main engines.